and a beneficiary of it because his name's on some of these patents. So it's a lot of shenanigans happening behind the scenes, and most people don't really actually have a clue what's going on. So it's pretty unbelievable.
And don't forget that it was Fauci in 2017. Remember that video we shared in a previous podcast where he says the next administration will have to deal with a pandemic. And then they did Event 201. And then, Melinda Gates during the divorce proceeding reveals that Bill Gates is attached to or was attached to Epstein, right? I mean, it's just like this global cabal exists, and it's like it's out there for everyone to see. I mean, it's just frankly frustrating that people just kind of lockstep sheep march around with their masks on. No, I mean, these people are blackmailed by sex trafficking to do agendas that benefit a very small few of global elites, and they use panic and COVID and all this stuff to effectuate their agenda. I mean, it's out there for everyone to see. But let's move on.
And and if you look at like the vaccine cards and what's coming. This is going to be a line in the sand for a lot of people. And I think that if you look at the problem reaction solution about, okay, now we have these vaccine cards, the cards, this isn't going to last long. The cards is definitely going to be part of the problem, and the solution is going to be something automated, something digital. A card this day and age is kind of a ridiculous solution. Show me your cards. So I can very easily see this transitioning to the digital passport, the digital, and then something that's just part of you, something that's in you. We've been talking about the merging technology into the human for a long time. So I think this is like the transition from pre-card to post in your body kind of verification. So I think we're just at the steps of it.
I have some semi-automatic remedies.
That's right. A lot of people, I don't know if this is a hoax or not, but a lot of people have been reporting that their arms where they got the injection of the gene therapy is magnetic. So maybe there is something in it that, rather than needing a card, you can just maybe flash a device over the injection site, and if it's magnetic or not, like you've been tagged magnetically. You know what I mean? Maybe.
I think they're going to go with the phone first. I would stay away from that magnet thing. I think that's bunk.
You think that's a hoax? Yeah,
I do, because I mean, the way they were sort of dismissing the any concerns about the vaccine. I think even Melinda Gates said is, oh, we're not going to microchip you. Like that's the the only concern. So I would say limited hangout on the magnet thing, because there's just not enough in there. It's getting dispersed in your body. It's not actually putting a chip in there. I mean, it's just so many reasons.
It's nano. It's nano.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
It's just kind of a silly thing on the internet, I guess. But yeah, the phone, the blockchain, that type of stuff, that's coming, at least for some.
That's here in some places. Yeah, in some countries already, they've got it implemented.
Yeah, that's here and spreading. There might be a few places, the free states of the U.S., where maybe you don't have that, but it's coming and here already in many different places. X. I'm going to bring up the photograph that was sent to us that I forgot to cover in the previous week. Would you maybe just spend maybe 5 minutes talking about this photograph?
Yeah, you bet. So this is a rare one because the photograph is a photograph. It's not a digital image. It's on Kodak paper, and the reason the gentleman sent it to me is because I used to work at Kodak, and there's some markings on the back of the paper that was too hard for him to see, but I thought if I take a look, I could have some, give a little bit of insight. So essentially this was photographed and printed on Kodak paper. The photograph was sent to me. The numbers and letters on the back, all they are is when you put a photograph through a developer machine that we used to have at all these 1 hour photos all over the place. The lab tech might brighten the photo, might add reds or greens, and that would print on the back along with the store's ID and what number photograph that was of the day. So I thought, maybe I could find that store ID and help verify, what date this was taken and stuff like that. I did get it down where it's clearly around 1985, so it matches with the logo we used to print on the back of the paper, because all it says is Kodak paper and not developed with Kodak paper. And there was a bunch of variations, but they changed every decade, so you can kind of put it into a decade. So that was kind of cool. What I did find with those numbers is that the lab tech at the photo place, whatever it was, a 1 hour drive through or Rite Aid, added some red to it or whatever. But that's all we could find. There was no information about the store itself. Anyway, as far as the photograph goes, I immediately went into what we call color temperatures. And when you have a strange object like you're seeing here, the first thing you want to do is check the color temperatures. And it's perfect. I mean, there's a red tendency towards everything in this photograph that steers towards black, that approaches 255. And we see that, or I should say approaches 0. And we see that in the stealth, and we see that in the saucer object. So there's no question about it that the time this shutter was open, that image, that object was there. So, stage 1 kind of passes. Stage 2 was let's check the scatter patterns on the focus, and we don't really have anything to go by on that one because there's nothing in the foreground to help. But as far as the blur of the plane and the blur of the object, they're pretty consistent. I mean, clearly the object is closer, but I can't tell how much closer. It could be something small that's very close. The third thing that we did is motion, and unfortunately, the gentleman didn't know what ISO the negative was and what shutter speed the camera was operating at, because that tells you a lot. We figured the stealth was going, I think, between 200 and 400 miles per hour. So you can kind of like figure out blur based on that and what you would expect to see in any other moving objects. And it was funny that the saucer, if I could call it that for the rest of this, it doesn't have hardly any blur on it. In fact, you can see it's irregular. So where you kind of picture these things to be spinning at a high speed, it doesn't really appear that that's the case. The logical thinking of this is that if the stealth was flying by and the gentleman just threw this thing into the air, they are overlooking the ocean. And I guess we don't really know how close the shore is, but feels like he's throwing that thing over the ocean, and he has 5 photographs. So that would mean throwing it, going and retrieving it, and then magically having the stealth fly by again and doing it again. So I kind of discounted that too, and it's, like I'm just being honest, it's passing all the tests. So the final test we did was actually blue channel noise, and that's kind of best represented in the picture, the cutout picture in the top right, where you really start to see things on a pixel level. And I don't have that version of the photo in full in front of me now, but what we found is that with all film grain, since it's a 3D layer of the actual silver halide, you're going to get patterns. They just happen naturally. But you rarely get straight lines. And if you take the time to zoom into the saucer, you can see directly above it, there is kind of a series of white pixels that form a little bit of a line. Now, we found probably 5 or 6 examples of that throughout the photograph. So, it could just be coincidence. So I didn't feel that was enough to say we're looking at an object like some guy's got a large pole with this thing hanging from it and he's just swinging it. So while we can't rule it out, we can't say that that's what it is. So, I think like out of the 6 check boxes, it matched 5 of them with what I would testify in court as being a legitimate image in front of a camera. And that's
I think this is a good photograph. And X, it's just amazing having you on the team because you can actually explain what image specialists do. You know what I mean? So I just think that's pretty cool, and I thought it would be valuable for the usual suspects to hear, just how image analysis works. And I think this is a legit photograph. I mean, I get your concern with the white line. However, the white line appears all over the place. To me, I just think it's just like an image artifact, using like an older camera or something like that. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty neat photograph. And the person that shared this with us, that we likely will be bringing on to a future show here, maybe next week or the week after, because he does a lot of research in the UFO field, and it might be neat to bring him on as a special guest. So. All right, we're going to return now, unless there's anybody else have any comments on this photo or anything like that. All righty.
Straw Hat Dwoman 4 King Pirate. Just now, thanks for the warning about Patreon censorship. I am comparing and deciding if I should invest my time in Patreon or other. What do you recommend as an alternative to Patreon that is better? I also live in San Francisco and I share solutions for Earth catastrophe cycle and a sales model that reduces inequality and makes a profit. I'd like to share with you behavioral economics technology solutions for poverty and politics. What I can offer is a complete solution resource kit for first solving inequality and fixing economics and then restructuring politics and creating a new social order. The path I propose is incentive positive, aka personally profitably, for all and fully capable of solving all these problems. But I guess that's a lot to accept and I'm happy to share supporting evidence. Plus sellers and producers and consumers might make 35% more profit, with 60% more sales volume and compete 200% more efficiently in 150% more marketplaces. https://sites.google.com/view/The Hope Project. Plus everyone richer than you. Plus everyone richer than you, usually paid more than you on average. Plus everyone poorer than you, usually paid less than you on average. Plus average prices for the average consumer would go down 30%, and even lower for the poorest people usually. Plus line waits could be 50% shorter on average, and even faster for the richest consumers usually. Plus sellers and producers and consumers might make 35% more profit, with 60% more sales volume and compete 200% more efficiently in 150% more marketplaces.
We're going to return now to our next. Oh, go ahead, Cyril.
Sorry, I was just going to say in the comment section, we have some comments and
Yeah, I see.
was
That's actually
someone
in
mentioned.
California, so that's the Pacific Ocean.
Okay, so it's not in Switzerland; it is in California.
No, this
And then
wasn't
the
a
other
Billy
comment-
Meyer photo. This was just another one because of what
Oh,
this
okay.
gentleman does. Someone sent these to him.
Okay. So someone made a comment saying that if it's an F-117 in 1985, that would have been an interesting time for that to come out and be in a picture with a UFO, because that didn't come out until 1990. In
Yeah,
Desert
it
Storm.
was actually built as early as 82, but it was still kind of in secret until late 89 and early 90. Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, so we're now going to return to our next article here, and this is about the basically converging crises of the rise of a new world order and basically the next step in the agenda, which eerily we predicted a few months ago when the Muppet won the election, because nobody really thinks the election was the most secure in history. So what typically do these corptocracy folks do? Is they capitulate to the military-industrial complex, and they declare war in the Middle East. And what have we seen is the escalation, almost an unprecedented escalation of conflict in the Middle East. So it looks like Israel is now doing a ground invasion of Palestine, major escalation. The next series of links are just video image of essentially just the scale and scope of this conflict and how it just keeps escalating wildly. Here's another photograph of the Iron Dome and the rockets coming in. Here's a building blowing up. Just a whole number of photographs and videos of this escalating conflict. Also, eerily enough, is you don't see a lot of this on mainstream. A lot of these videos and photographs were provided to us from actual sources on the ground, shared via Discord or Telegram or those types of services. And yeah, I mean, war, I'm pretty sure, is now here. And it's a little spooky that we were talking about the only way to galvanize the world population around their particular leadership was to do this sort of classic war. So I don't know. I mean, I think war is inevitable. I think it's going to spread into proxy wars in other countries, and basically be a new hot Cold War, right? That's kind of where Vietnam came from, where, people were fighting, in countries not directly between the US, Russia, China, but in these sort of proxy wars. So I do think this is on the horizon, and I think this is going to escalate over the next couple of months, likely converging at our important date of July and August. That what we've been calling a nexus point of a lot of these converging crises. Anybody have any thoughts on the rising Middle East war? I mean, it really didn't take long for that to happen.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question. So, is Hamas getting its weaponry from U.S. interests? Is it actually getting it from interest to justify? Is all this just a false flag like a real false flag to justify all this? I'm a little confused because
I know where you're coming from, and I agree, and that's the same question I have, because you know what it feels like to me. They know that the sheep, which also tend to be bleeding hearts, let's face it, they're not all for war. So they got this hypnotized mass public that they don't want to scare into, oh my God, they're going to see that we're warmongers. And I think that that's why we're seeing all these other insane stories. They're still keeping this buried, and really it's an Israeli act of aggression. However they're going to spin it on the news that we get to see, that's what it appears to be. And I don't think they know how to spoon feed it to the public without a certain amount of kickback. So who knows?
Yeah, I just have a hard time believing anything I hear from the media at this point. I think there's so much backdoor stuff from governments funding other governments that actually appear to be enemies, but they're working together on things. So I'm just starting to question virtually everything, especially when it has to do with something as grand as war. Is because if you're the power structures of the world and you need something, it's very easy to justify it when you own the media.
I don't think
Gary,
I don't think it's about money from the like what we used to expect, making money with the military industrial complex, because I honestly think they all know they can print all they want. So I think it's more of a land grab, a power grab, and maybe they just don't know how to spin it. I'm sorry, Adrian. You were asking Gary something?
Yeah, no, Gary, I was just curious, based on your particular background, you have some insight into this. If this continues to escalate, what do you think happens next? Does the U.S. go in, or does it spread to some other countries? What do you think is likely if this continues to escalate?
Well, my point of view is not a particularly popular one in some circles. But yes, I do have a lot of experience and a lot of research insight over many years of this Middle Eastern situation, if you want to call it that. And as Tony pointed out in the chat room, Hamas was created by Israel to counter the PLO. So I guess I'm just going to leave it at one thing. To call a conflict between people who throw rocks and shoot bottle rockets against the IDF, which is a very heavily armed and funded by the United States military with high-tech equipment. So to call that a war is completely misguided.
Right. Yeah.
Do
Interesting.
they need to destroy it so they can rebuild it into like the smart city, so it's an actual smart prison? Because it seems like it's kind of a prison there to start with. Is this part of the plan, is to just, you know, tear it down so they can rebuild it in the smart city form, or is that not the right angle?
I think there
think
was
it
a
could
quote
be,
used a
but-
while back. I forget who it was from, about we need to occasionally go in and mow the lawn, which is to test weapons or do other things within the area. So I don't think they're going to clear out Gaza and create a smart city there. I think they've got pretty much what they want there. They've got complete control over it, and they can squeeze the population as they want and cut off food source and put them on calorie restrictions as they have done. To do that. So my guess is it's a way to sort of rile up the area and maybe get back into Syria, which is what they've been wanting to do for a while. So I would certainly keep
And
my
Syria-
eyes on that area.
Is Syria because of the pipeline?
Well, Syria, because they failed, right? They wanted Syria and they didn't get it. So to get back there, and so they can have their pipings that they want to go through there.
Yeah, I think that this is just the beginning of a much larger escalation of just conflict globally, which is part of the Corptocracy agenda, to rally people together, push forward for the global order. I think this is just the birth pangs of a much larger conflict that we've been predicting for a while. And I mean, if the previous Biden administration is any indication, the U.S. will likely be involved. But anyways, just kind of creepy that we predicted this. We predicted Cyber Polygon, and then, the pipeline, cyber attack happens. We're also predicting the July nexus of a whole bunch of economic calamity and the air quote end of the pandemic, whatever that means. Just a lot of stuff is going to happen this summer, at least we think. And we've been pretty accurate so far. Moving on, what's another thing we have our eye on is this idea of global civil war. This is a pretty shocking concept when you think about it, and you kind of have to put 2 or 3 pieces together. But here is an open letter from something like 120 generals, or I'm sorry, 317 generals and admirals that is signed, and essentially what they've said is that the election was stolen. It is an illegitimate administration, and that civil war is a very likely possibility here in the United States in the near future. And what else do we see? I don't have a particular link for it, but did you hear recently that Department of Homeland Security is now focusing on domestic terrorism, basically people who don't go along with the narrative? They're focusing on those individuals. There's a new Pentagon surveillance program focusing on basically non-sheep that they're going to try to round you up. And how about the pictures and video from Canada where they were dragging pastors out of their churches for opening the churches too soon? And the guy was actually a refugee from former Soviet Russia, and he's yelling at these people saying that this is exactly what they did in Soviet Russia and things. I mean, things are like getting to a point here. I mean, just look at the differences in the country between. I mean, we're actually using words like the free states of the U.S., right? Florida, Texas, Tennessee. We're actually using words like that, and then it's spreading into other countries. So here is an article about how a similar thing happened in France, where generals and admirals in France gained over 220,000 signatures warning of civil war in France. So this is happening. I mean, we might see the concept of civil war happening simultaneously in many countries all at once. Who would have thought that was going to happen? What do you guys think about?
What's perfect about that? You get a great reset. I mean, it's like this to me is literally them. This is what they've been telling us the whole time. And when we have these generals, are like, do we trust these generals? Are these guys not part of the destruction and the sacrifice of our country. Because a civil war and everything that we've been talking about, splitting up of the country, getting rid of the Constitution, all these things aren't good. Even though it's probably inevitable, they're still not good because that's what they need for the Great Reset. So it's almost like all these generals and all these CIA people, it's like, don't they still work for the government? Aren't they, like, are they really coming out and being like, oh, it was stolen? It's like I think they're feeding what they want us to be doing. I don't know. I still think that these guys are all still in on it, and they need the destruction of our country and the destruction of these other countries to justify the Great Reset, to justify Agenda 2030. Sounds crazy, but if they do what they're doing now, it's going to sound great, and universal income is going to sound great to a lot of people when they've destroyed everything. So I think they're in the destruction path right now, and I just don't trust these guys. Like, I didn't trust them during the Trump administration, and I don't trust them now. And I think I'm just highly suspect of these guys. Anyone else?
It's interesting. Yeah, what's interesting about your point is it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? It's almost inevitable that something like this will happen, where we either destroy it through the rise of nationalist socialism, or we destroy the world by fighting nationalist socialism. So either way, it's inevitable of a Great Reset. New World Order will rise to power. I mean, it's kind of a tricky situation to be in. I don't know. Anybody else have any thoughts on, I don't know, just the fact that people are seriously talking about simultaneous global civil wars right now? Pretty wild. All right. Well, if there's no more comment on that, we will move on to the election stuff going on. 17.5% of ballots appear to be fraudulent, or don't really work. Interesting. Or how about the fact that nobody seems to know the passwords to the servers, or that the servers were erased, for some reason, and now they're actually subpoenaing the supervisors of the election in Arizona, meaning they'll be dragged into court because they have to explain, well, if the server was deleted, who did that? I mean, you were under subpoena not to delete it, but you did it anyways. They'll probably just lie, because if they were willing to delete servers under subpoena, they're probably willing to lie under subpoena. But then again, you also ask the question, if you don't know the passwords to the servers, how did you run the election at all? So things are really kind of heating up over there, and it's getting kind of interesting. And we'll see if this spreads to other states. We'll see if, what really is the big lie, right? Who really incited the riot? Was it Trump asking for the investigation and audit into the election, or was it the people that refused to investigate and audit the election, right? Who really incited it? But also, just the fact that they're deleting things, hiding things, missing passwords, getting subpoenaed. Things are really heating up, and kind of, Cyril, to your point, this could really unravel everything, right? This could really lead to that civil war, which maybe was the plan all along. I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on this one? Yeah. All right. We have an article here about the surveillance of Americans without warrant. This is a new Pentagon program. This is nothing new, but this is just yet another program that they're instituting. And think about that. You have the Department of Homeland Security focusing on domestic terrorism, which basically means you don't toe the party line, the one-party rule line. You have the Pentagon getting involved. You even have the Post Office getting involved, right? Remember that? We shared that a couple of weeks ago. The Post Office is surveilling non-nationalist socialists. I mean, it's getting out.
Steve Whetstone, founder of the HOEP project. Very smart, no money, lots of solutions for solving world problems.